Before we can talk directly about sentence complements, we need to talk about three kinds of verbs in English. As you'll see, each of these three kinds of verbs is related to a particular type of sentence complement. The three main kinds of verbs in English are transitive verbs, intransitive verbs, and linking verbs. Let's take a look at each. A transitive verb expresses action that passes from the subject of the verb to an object of the verb. As you recall, a verb is a word that expresses action or state of being. A transitive verb is always an action verb. The subject of the verb is the person or thing that does the action of the verb. The object of a transitive verb receives the action. Take a look at this sentence as an example. Omar typed the letter. Now, what's the verb in this sentence? The verb is the word typed. What's the subject of the verb typed? That is, who or what did the typing? The answer is Omar. So Omar is the subject, typed is the verb. Now, this is a transitive verb because it has an object, that is, something that receives the action of the verb. Who or what receives the action of the typing in this sentence? The answer is letter. The word letter is a noun which is receiving the action of the verb typed, and therefore it's the object of the verb. Because the verb typed has an object which receives the action, we refer to typed as a transitive verb. Here's another example. Lorraine swam 20 laps. What's the verb in this sentence? The verb is swam. What's the subject of the verb swam? That is, who or what did the swimming? The answer, Lorraine. Lorraine swam. Now, what did Lorraine swim? That is, what receives the action of the verb swam in this sentence? The answer is laps. Laps is a noun which receives the action of the verb swam. It tells us what Lorraine swam. So laps is the object of the verb swam, and therefore, in this sentence, swam is a transitive verb, because only a transitive verb expresses action that passes from the subject of the verb to an object. Now, the second type of verb is an intransitive verb. As you may know, the prefix in English usually means not. It takes the meaning of the word and reverses it or negates it. So you might be able to guess that an intransitive verb is a verb that is not transitive, and that's exactly right. Here's the definition. An intransitive verb expresses action that does not have an object. We saw a moment ago that a transitive verb has an object which receives the action of the verb. An intransitive verb doesn't have such an object. Take a look at this sentence. Elliot slept. This is a short sentence, only 2 words, but it is a complete sentence. It has a subject and a verb, and it expresses a complete thought. In this sentence, the verb is slept, and the subject is Elliot. And the verb does not have any object. It expresses a complete thought without having an object. We don't need to ask, what did Elliot sleep? Because the meaning is complete without any object. Elliot slept, that tells us exactly what happened. It's perfectly clear, and it doesn't sound incomplete. So slept in this sentence is an intransitive verb. It has no object, and it doesn't need one. Here's another example. Jacques laughed. Again, it's a very short sentence, but it is complete. It contains a subject and a verb. The verb is laughed. The subject is Jacques. Jacques is the one doing the laughing. And there is no object. The sentence doesn't tell us what Jacques laughed. He simply laughed. That's a complete thought, a complete idea in itself, and no object is needed. Once again, we're dealing with an intransitive verb in this sentence. The third type of verb is a linking verb. A linking verb expresses a state of being. It links the subject to another word in the sentence. Remember that our definition of verb explains that a verb is a word that expresses an action or a state of being. Both transitive and intransitive verbs express actions. A linking verb expresses a state of being. Rather than telling us what the subject does, it tells us what the subject is. The most Common linking verb is be, and the word be in many different forms is found in lots of sentences. Some other common linking verbs are act, appear, seem, taste, and turn, and there are quite a few others. You can recognize a linking verb by the fact that what follows the linking verb and the subject of the linking verb are in some way the same. The linking verb is called a linking verb because it links those two things and in some way equates them or tells us that they are one and the same thing. Here are a couple of examples. Kareem is a school teacher. We said a moment ago that the verb to be is the most common linking verb. Here's an example of a form of the verb to be. The verb is. What's the subject of the verb is? Kareem. Kareem is the one who is. And following the verb is, we're told exactly what Kareem is, a teacher, or specifically a school teacher. So in this case, the subject Kareem is being linked by the linking verb is to the word teacher. Kareem is teacher. And the words a school are giving a little more information about what kind of teacher. Notice that is operating here as a linking verb because it's linking Kareem and teacher. It's telling us that Kareem and teacher are in some way the same thing. And in fact, they are. That's what Kareem is. So the two things are being linked or equated to one another. And that's how a linking verb works. As I've said, the verb to be is the most common linking verb, but there are a number of others. Here's an example. Leanna looked nervous. What's the verb in this sentence? The verb is looked. The subject is Leanna. That tells us who looked. And the word that follows looked is the word nervous. And this is being linked to Leanna by the linking verb looked. We can tell that in this sentence looked is operating as a linking verb because Leanna and the word that follows, nervous, are being linked or equated with one another. We're being told that Leanna and nervous are in some way the same thing. And in fact, we know that Leanna is nervous. Notice that in this case, the verb looked, which is a linking verb in this sentence, is being used to mean almost the same as the verb to be. When we say that Leanna looked nervous, we're saying in a way that Leanna is or was nervous. So the verb looked is being used as a linking verb in a way that's similar to the way the verb to be is used. We're being told that Leanna and nervous are linked or equated in some way. And that's why looked is being used in this sentence as a linking verb. One more example. Edgardo felt optimistic. In this sentence, the verb is felt, and the subject is Edgardo. And what did Edgardo feel? He felt optimistic. Once again, felt is being used as a linking verb in this sentence because Edgardo and optimistic are being linked. They are being equated. When we say that Edgardo felt optimistic, that's almost the same thing as saying he was optimistic. It's just putting a slightly different meaning on it. So in this sentence, felt is being used as a linking verb, and what comes before and after the linking verb, those two things are being equated or being made to appear the same. Edgardo and optimistic go together, and that's why felt is considered a linking verb in this sentence. These then are the three kinds of verbs: transitive verbs, intransitive verbs, and linking verbs. And as you'll see in a moment, it's important to understand the difference in order to understand how sentence complements are used. Notice that some verbs can be used as more than one kind of verb. In other words, the very same verb word can be used in a transitive way or an intransitive way, or perhaps as a linking verb. Take a look at these examples. Miguel ran. Here's a short sentence which expresses a complete thought in itself. The verb is ran, the subject is Miguel. And when we read this sentence, we understand Miguel ran. Perhaps he's a runner on the track team and went out running this morning. And we could say, well, Miguel ran. This could be a complete sentence. And in this case, the verb ran is being used as what kind of verb? Transitive, intransitive, or linking? In this case, ran is being used as an intransitive verb. Remember that an intransitive verb doesn't have any object. The action simply stops with the verb ran, and the action does not pass on to an object that follows the verb. Miguel ran, a complete sentence in itself, and ran is an intransitive verb. But now compare it to this sentence. Jorge ran the car wash. Here we have the same verb, ran, but it's used in a very different way than in the previous sentence. In the previous sentence, we saw that the verb ran had no object. Miguel ran, and that was the end of the sentence. In this case, the verb ran does have an object. The action of the verb ran is being passed on to something which is receiving that action, namely the car wash. That is what Jorge ran. So in this sentence, the verb ran, this very same verb that we saw a moment ago being used as an intransitive verb, is being used as a transitive verb, a verb that has an object which receives the action of the verb. So these two sentences show us that the same verb can sometimes be used as either a transitive verb or an intransitive verb. Here's another example of how the role played by the same verb may change from one sentence to the next. Anna grew tomatoes. In this sentence, the verb is grew. The subject is Anna. Now, what did Anna grow? Is there an object to the verb grew? Yes, there is. She grew tomatoes. So the noun tomatoes is the object of the verb grew. It receives the action of the verb. Therefore, what kind of verb is grew in this sentence? It's a transitive verb, because remember, only transitive verbs pass the action along to an object. Compare that with this sentence. Tova grew hungry. Here we have the same verb, grew, but the meaning is a little different, and the structure of the sentence is different. In this case, the verb grew doesn't have an object. This word hungry doesn't tell us a thing that Tova grew, the way Anna grew tomatoes. Hungry isn't a noun, and it doesn't name some object which receives the action of the verb grew. Instead, it tells us what Tova was. Therefore, what kind of verb is grew? In this case, grew is being used as a linking verb. The two words Tova and hungry are being linked or equated. We're being told, in effect, that Tova was hungry. She grew hungry, that is, she got to be hungry over time, but in effect, the two things are being equated with one another. Tova was hungry. That's another way of saying almost the same thing as Tova grew hungry. So in this particular example, the verb grew is being used as a linking verb. It is linking Tova and hungry. The two things are being equated with one another. Hungry is not the object of the action. It's not receiving the action in the way the tomatoes received the action of growing in the sentence about Anna. Instead, grew is being used as a linking verb, and Tova and hungry are being equated with one another. Once again, notice that the very same verb can be used with different meanings to play a different role in a sentence. So the same verb may be a transitive verb or an intransitive verb or a linking verb. You can't tell what type of verb a verb is just by looking at the verb in isolation. Instead, you have to look at it in the context of the sentence and understand how it's being used and how it relates to the words nearby. In your study guide, we've provided an exercise which will enable you to test your understanding of these concepts.